So the murder of Antwan D in February 2001, 1 month after they murdered Clifford Lewis Jr. So they killed one innocent black, and now they're killing another innocent black man, and this is within the same year, back to back, 1 month next month, right? And Antwan D. Bryant, he was just a passenger in a vehicle that says, theoretically, they said they tried to run over the police. Who knows? They just lie whenever they want to. But even if that's true, you know, Antwan D., the murder of 20-year-old Antwan D. Bryant, Antwan D. Bryant wasn't defiant. He wasn't non-compliant. His only crime was bad timing. He was sitting in the passenger side. Antwan D. Bryant wasn't even driving, and he ain't no worthless piece of shit con like Derek Bond and his fat ass bitch moms. He was a passenger to the driver who theoretically ran over the foot of the LMPD, and the LMPD, all naturally just had to murder Antwan D. So, you almost get run over by a vehicle and you just start shooting at the vehicle, any vehicle that you want to, and it doesn't matter. And David Stengel said he didn't file any criminal charges and he didn't see, any reason to do so. Well, why not? I mean, they need to exercise due caution. They can't just be, pulling out the pistol and popping off shots anytime they want to. And even if you do, I mean, the driver's the one that's in control of the vehicle. They're the ones that's actually doing it. And so they didn't give a shit about that. They basically, it was like, how dare you? You almost ran over me, so somebody has to die. Dave Stengel covered his ass up, and then they get away with older crimes. And that's what happened. August 22nd, 2002, Marshall Marbly was murdered again and again. Greg Stengel, the county attorney, didn't present it to the grand jury. So Greg Stengel just seems like an absolute fucking shitty fucking person, man. He just keeps on covering up all these people's crimes. This is the county attorney. And between the mayor, the chief of police, and the county attorney, that's the trifecta of the people that run this town. That's the people with the most power. So August 22nd, 2002, Marshall Marbly is going to get shot. And there's going to be a dead man, and they're not going to get any, that's the point of the judicial system, is you put it to a jury and then they decide. But by keeping it out of the system, right, just like Hunter S. Thompson said, the best way to protect yourself is to keep yourself out of the system, they get the county attorney to manipulate the grand jury process, and the grand jury doesn't issue anything. And that's such bullshit. You should, the grand jury is there for a reason. Give it to the grand jury. If they think there's an indictment to be made, and let them make the indictment and let the trial go through. If there's no crime, if there's a dead body, there's definitely a crime. There's no reason, if I'm sitting on the grand jury, there's no way any murder that happens is going to go by without an indictment. If it was a citizen that got murdered, there would be an indictment. But if there's a police officer that murders somebody, then they don't issue any type of indictment. So this is the year after Antwan D. and Clifford Lewis Jr. gets murdered, 2002, August 22nd. So he's sitting in his car, just chilling, and he's murdered by James Coughlin and Jefferson Atkins. And he's shot 16 times. So another 16 shots. 16 shots. I mean, they're just trigger happy, and when you shoot that many times, that's out of malice, that's out of hatred. It's not out of to stop a threat. It's not a defensive stance. It's an offensive stance. Shoot 16 times, and he was in his own vehicle. Mr. Ali filed two separate actions that were consolidating this action. One against the city of Louisville, Jefferson County Metro Government. The other is against the individual officers involved in the incident with Mr. Marbly, James Coughlin, Patty Hannafin, Jefferson Atkins, and Eric Johnson. So there were 4 police officers involved. And James Coughlin and Jefferson Atkins are the ones that take the fall. But you have Eric Johnson and Patty Hannafin, who are also mentioned in the lawsuit against the police. There is an eyewitness that had said, Jeffrey Warner, that reported that Mr. Marbly came towards Officer Atkins with a cane, and then when Officer Atkins went to his trunk and got a shotgun, Mr. Marbly went back to his car. And then it alleges that Mr. Warner also stated that another police car arrived on the scene, and while another officer drew his gun, Officer Atkins held the shotgun and screamed, "Get out of the car! Get out of the car!" So, just pull the gun out first and then shoot and ask questions later. Deposition testimony indicates that the police blocked Mr. Marbly's car so he could not drive away. They're blocking him in the deposition. So they blocked him in, he could only stay in the car, and then they shot him. Sergeant Johnson testified that the officers could not communicate with Mr. Marbly with the windows rolled up in their car. You can hear through the windows. The deposition of Eric Johnson, page 31. In contrast, Officer Coughlin testified that he could hear what Mr. Marbly was saying even though the windows were rolled up on the car. Deposition of James Coughlin. Officer Coughlin claims that Mr. Marbly was saying stuff about Jesus Christ. He also stated that Mr. Marbly had a cane with a rope around it one end and a flashlight in the other hand. Officer Coughlin stated the officers checked the doors, see if they're unlocked, and backed away from the car to talk a minute. So they got time to plot and plan. You know, he's not in their face. After that, Officer Seymour busted out the rear driver's side window. Likewise, Sergeant Johnson testified that after a brief discussion between Sergeant Johnson and Officer Seymour, they decided to break out the rear view window in the driver's side. Officer Hannafin testified that Sergeant Johnson made the decision to break out the window. So they're all, you know, verifying each other on that fact. Sergeant Johnson, I mean, there's going to be some discrepancies in their stories. Sergeant Johnson claimed that they tried to talk with Mr. Marbly, deposition of Eric Johnson. In response, Sergeant Johnson responded that Mr. Marbly pointed his keys and a little flashlight off at the officers and said, "This is my phaser and this is a tractor beam." So, I mean, either this guy's clearly crazy or he's messing with them, right? He just has a little flashlight on his keychain. Hey, this is my tractor beam. This is my phaser, right? This is my tractor beam. And, well, that's stupid. It's a little light, and it probably isn't even like infrared. It probably just a little, you know, night light. Mr. Marbly also said, "You're dead" to the officers, and he said, "I'm Jesus Christ." So that's, I mean, that just seems like they're just trying to make him look crazy. Then Mr. Marbly came out of the back window and struck Officer Seymour with a cane. So they bust out the back window. Now he's jumping out the broken back window, swinging a cane at him. At this point, Sergeant Johnson, you know, if you believe what they're saying, at this point, Sergeant Johnson testified that Officer Seymour deployed his pepper spray. At this point, Officer Coughlin testified one of the officers deployed pepper balls. So they're spraying pepper spray, they're spraying pepper balls. Officer Grissom also testified that Officer Atkins fired pepper balls into the car at this point. In contrast, Sergeant Johnson testified that pepper balls were not deployed until after Mr. Marbly showed a knife. Right, so now all of a sudden he's got a knife after the pepper ball. So man, he just has all the weapons in the world, right? According to the police, Marbly he's got a gun, he's got, you know, a cane, he's got a knife. He has every, you know, piece of weapon out there in his hands. He just keeps on picking up weapons. After they pepper sprayed him and fired pepper balls at him, Officer Grisham stated that Mr. Marbly continued pointing the cane, acting like it was a gun, making shooting noises. So he's unfazed, right? They keep on popping him with all these pepper balls and stuff, and he's unfazed. After the pepper balls were allegedly fired, Officer Grisham stated that Mr. Marbly continued to point at, you know, acted like it was a gun, keep on pointing the cane at them. They broke the window, expandable baton, because he didn't want to get close, but then someone else said that he broke it with his mag light, and then someone else thinks that a breakout tool was used. So did they just use, you know, a baton or a mag light, or was there a breakout tool? So, I mean, there's three different stories right there. Officer Coughlin told a different story from Sergeant Johnson's account of when Officer Seymour was struck with a cane. So when they're, you know, supposedly he hits them, right, they say, but they're saying two different times. Officer Coughlin stated that after the driver's window was broken out, Mr. Marbly tried to hit Officer Seymour and Sergeant Johnson with his cane. The officers tried to grab the cane from Mr. Marbly. Mr. Marbly struck Officer Seymour with the cane, cutting him in the forearm. Officer Coughlin, like Sergeant Johnson stated, Officer Seymour sprayed him with pepper spray. Another version of the actions taken at that point was Officer Hannafin's account, in which she claimed that the driver's window was broken out so the officers could mace him. So, you know, they broke, which windows did they break out? All the windows? Did they break out every window that he had? The back window, the front window, every window. You know, he had every weapon. They were innocent. They had nothing. They were so scared. They're not afraid of this man. Deposition of Patty Hannafin. After the window was broken, she and Officer Seymour used mace, which has also been referred to as pepper spray and sometimes called OC spray. Stuck the cane out the window, hit Officer Seymour. Officer Hannafin stated that after Officer Seymour was stabbed with the cane in the arm, pepper balls were deployed. She thought that John Grissom fired the pepper balls. She also thought that the pepper balls were deployed at about the same time Mr. Marbly pulled out the knife. The officers fired beanbag rounds about the same time that Mr. Marbly showed the knife. In contrast, Officer Atkins stated that pepper balls were fired, then pepper spray was used. Then pepper balls were used again, and then the beanbag shotgun was used when Mr. Marbly produced a knife. Next, Officer Hannafin climbed onto the retaining wall beside Mr. Marbly's car so she could be seen in the car. Sergeant Johnson cautioned the other officers that she was on the wall and to be careful. And then Officer Hannafin yells, "Gun!" Officer Atkins saw Mr. Marbly reach over toward the passenger side. Officer Coughlin stated he saw Mr. Marbly pull out what looked like a rifle. Mr. Marbly raised the barrel above the door. Officer Coughlin claimed, "Mr. Marbly, I got something for you," before he turned to get the gun. Officer Coughlin saw the barrel. He shot 4 or 5 rounds from his pistol at Mr. Marbly. Then Officer Coughlin could see Mr. Marbly was bleeding. After that, Officer Coughlin saw Mr. Marbly with the gun in his right hand raise the barrel again. Officer Coughlin and Atkins fired their weapons at Mr. Marbly a second time, and Officer Coughlin thought he shot 4 or 5 rounds the second time. Officer Atkins said that the reason that he shot both times was he saw Mr. Marbly reach toward the passenger seat. So he's saying he's shooting when he didn't even see the gun. He just sees him reaching. We don't even know if there's really a gun there. When the officers fired their weapons, Officer Atkins, Coughlin, and Seymour were standing about the same distance from Mr. Marbly, very close together, with Seymour on the right and Coughlin on the left. Officer Atkins, however, did not see the gun until after he had fired 2 rounds at Mr. Marbly. Witnesses at the scene did not see the gun either. So nobody sees this supposed gun, right? So who knows if there is actually a gun. Some people just need any old reason to kill somebody. So if a police officer said there was a gun, well, case closed, that's all they needed, right? Well, there's a gun on the scene. Well, hell, he deserved to die. Well, wait a second, they had guns. So if you use that same logic, you reverse it, right, then he could have shot them because they had a gun. So, you know, just having one doesn't mean anything. But there's no witnesses that said that they didn't see any of them either. And even Officer Atkins said he didn't see the gun until he had fired 2 shots. So he just sees him reach, right, and then they just start shooting. Defendants Hannafin and Coughlin claim Mr. Marbly is holding the gun in his right hand. Photographs shows that Mr. Marbly's right hand was badly damaged, but the gun wasn't damaged. So Mr. Ali reasons that if Mr. Marbly had turned toward the officers with the gun, then the gun would have been between Mr. Marbly and the officers, so the gun would have been damaged. So if Mr. Marbly's right hand was shot and the gun was in his right hand, how come the gun didn't get shot too? Either which is a precision point shot. So there probably wasn't even a gun, it's probably planted. And the officers said the gun had been damaged before. The motion for summary judgment is granted in part and denied in part. The excessive force claims against officers Hannafin and Atkins for using non-deadly force, and against Sergeant Johnson for supervising while the officers used non-deadly force remain. All their claims are dismissed. So the excessive force claims that they were going to check out to pay attention to was against officers Hannafin, officers Atkins, and Sergeant Johnson, since he was the one that was being supervised, that was the supervisor. I assume they're all white. I don't know, just because 75% of the police force are white. Hannafin, you know, I don't know. I mean, back in the days of lynch and all a white woman would have to do is accuse a black man of rape, and he was getting slung up in a tree, even though she was probably the one that was raping him. So that's the story of Marshall Marbly, and I have heard different accounts. Actually, I heard he was just walking around, got shot in the stomach, and walks in the trailer, and then he dies. You know, so basically, it just seems like they had cornered him in this car, and they're like, you know, get out, comply with us, and he's like scared and doesn't do them. They break his window and shit, and then they, you know, he was like acting goofy and crazy, talking about a laser beam, talking about him being Jesus, so they can hear what he's saying, right? They can hear every word that he's saying, and then he reaches for something, and then she gets scared, and she says, "Gun!" And then that's when they shoot to kill. So, you know, this it's not as a clear-cut innocent case as the other ones where they were just doing absolutely nothing. But again, that's how they handled this situation. That was how they handled the situation, by just, you know, pulling the trigger and asking questions later. I mean, there's 5 of them, and they can't get a hold of one. Why wouldn't you bust out the driver's side window and pull him out the window? You know what I mean? Like, instead of doing all this other goofy stuff, if they really want to apprehend their suspect. We're going to see, again, Jefferson County Attorney David Stengel consistently just does not give a shit about any innocent people. David Stengel, the county attorney, he just defends the police. So to think that the county attorney or the police are on your side, it's like, that's not the case. They're there to enforce the laws that the politicians pass, but they don't actually have to protect and serve you. If I got robbed $1,800, there is no way to compel them to actually do their job. and they're their perceived job. And that's the thing, they don't protect and serve us. I get robbed $1,800 worth of stuff. I had the man's name, I got his address, I got everything about, you know, the whole situation, and they said they couldn't find a suspect. Like, what the fuck? How could you not find a suspect? What would a police officer do if they was robbed and they was, you know, and switch the thing. What would a police officer do if they're sitting in a car and they're getting jumped by plainclothes men? You know, like Clifford Lewis. If they're just sitting there, how would you react? And you just getting jumped by people that just jump out the car out of nowhere while you're sitting, and they say, get out the car, or we're gonna kill you. How would a police officer? I don't see how police officers are cocky and arrogant, and they, you know, they're ready to murder just for anybody giving them eye contact. They would be pissed off that somebody would do something like that. But see, there's no sense of justice. What is good for the goose isn't good for the gander. What the police do is acceptable. They're allowed to get away with any crime that they commit, and the citizens aren't even allowed to just give the appearance of disrespect.